Uh, Thanks for the invite, Andy. I appreciate you allowing me to come and talk to you guys. My name's Larry, K4AB. I'm from the Alabama Contest Group, and it's good to see some fellow members from the ACG show up for this tonight. As we all know, I don't think I have to tell anybody in this room that contesting is different from the southeast part of the country than it is anywhere else in the country, and in particular, New England. I'm trying to get my screen is froze. Hang on, guys. Well, okay. It's different here from anywhere in the world, especially New England. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, New England is just basically closer to the target audience, which is Europe, than we are. And almost their entire path is over saltwater. And if you were to take a string and put it on a globe and put it from Georgia or Alabama, for example, and put the other end in Central Europe, say Berlin or beautiful downtown Dusseldorf, you'll see that our path is not over saltwater. In Georgia, we break out over land in Georgia, over Newfoundland, and in Alabama, we break out over Quebec. And what that means is the more layer hops, which is at least 1 or 2, depending on the frequency, is going to cost you roughly 3 dB of signal loss. So by the time our signal even gets to New England, we're basically half power compared to those guys. So we're at a very tough disadvantage. To put it in terms of college football, which we in the Southeast are pretty versatile on, those guys in New England are bigger, stronger, and faster than we are. We have to be smarter and plan some strategy. I mean, to put it in parlance, those guys would be the Georgias and Alabamas of the world at college football, whereas we're Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt. So we ain't going to be as big, as strong, and fast as those guys are. So we have to be smarter, quicker. The focus of this little presentation is going to be on ARRL, CW, and sideband. CW is coming up a week after this one on the 19th. The sideband contest is the first weekend in March. Other major contests, of course, we all know: CQ Worldwide, ARRU, WPX, Russian DX contest. There's just gobs of them. We of course just finished the 160 CW CQ, and that was a blast. DX conditions were awful, but I think I said it was more like a 160 sweepstakes than a DX contest, but it was still fun. ARRL contest is different from CQ Worldwide. Of course, they're both DX contests, but they're very, very different. Of course, in CQ Worldwide, everybody works everyone. Our target audience is Europe, and they may be working other Europeans. They may be working JAs, not even thinking about the US. In ARRL, that's different. We are their target audience. They're all looking for us. JAs, they don't matter to the Europeans. South America doesn't matter to the Europeans. It's all about USA and Canada. So they're all pointing their Yagis our way, and they need our QSOs for their points and their multipliers. And of course, every section in the United States and every province in Canada, all the ARRL sections are all multipliers on each band. So they need us on 10, they need us on 160. The biggest way to maximize your score in really any contest is maximize your butt in the chair time, BIC. The more you operate, the more score you're going to have. It's simple. And the easiest way to do that is to plan your operating time. A lot of us have family and friends, and they monopolize our times, especially on the weekends. And one way a lot of guys have gotten around that is to inform your family and friends long in advance. I'm talking months in advance that I plan on operating the ARRL CW DX contest coming up on the weekend of February 19th. If you're unable to do that, say you work still for a living, and up until recently I did, and I had to focus my time on the weekends just around my work schedule. Another thing to do to maximize your score is to make a band plan. I'll go over something like that in a minute. And of course, the final point, and I think the most important point, is to call CQ a bunch, especially in ARRL. A lot of the Europeans may not be CQ, and they may be looking for malts. And you can't be the loudest signal on the band if you're not transmitting. Going back to getting support from your family, here's what I know some guys have done. They've actually made a little note and placed it on the refrigerator door using those little magnets. You'll say, I'm going to be operating this contest on these certain days, and I know you've got a lot of stuff for me to do. You have to get me to cut the grass, clean out the garage, all this honeydew list. Well, have them write down on that refrigerator list what they need you to do before the contest, and make sure they realize that during that time, you're not to be disturbed. And another little thing you can put down at the bottom is, when I got through with the contest on Sunday night, pizza for everybody. We'll sit around and have fun. You can eat all the pizza you want. Kind of a little goal for your family and friends to shoot for. Before the contest, it was Sun Tzu that said every battle is won before it's even fought. And a lot of that was true. The most important thing you can do is to repair all your antennas and equipment. The last thing you want to be doing on Friday before the contest is going out, resoldering some coax cables or repairing some coax that the critters have eaten up, or putting the other end of the dipole back up in the tree. That's just, it's very fatiguing, and it causes you to lose your focus from the contest that's coming up in just a few hours. Get all the software loaded for the appropriate contest. You don't want to be sitting there on Friday afternoon trying to get all your CW messages loaded up or making sure N1MM Plus works. You need to get that done long before, a week before the contest if you can. Load all the CW messages, the sideband messages, and your F1 keys. I like to have everything done on the Thursday before the contest. On Friday, I don't want to do anything. I want to sleep before the contest. And sleep, believe it or not, is a very, very important thing if you're going to operate contests, especially if you want to put your butt in the chair for 44, 45, 48 hours. You've got to be well rested before the contest. I like to get as much sleep as possible the week before the contest. So for starting next week, starting Sunday, this coming Sunday, I'll start to get to bed, try to get to bed at least an hour or two earlier than I normally would. There's a school of thought that says you can't bank asleep. That's B-A-N-K, bank. But if you're well rested before a contest, I think you're going to really have a much better time. And you don't get as fatigued as easy. You can certainly go through the first night fairly well. I try to go through the first night completely without sleep. If I do need a nap after European sunrise, I'll take maybe an hour and a half of sleep. On Friday before the contest, I'll try to sleep as late as I can. I found it more difficult to sleep as I've grown older. But I'll try to sleep till maybe 8 o'clock in the morning on Friday morning. Then I'll get up, eat a meal, wander around, maybe go outside and get some sunshine. And then what I try to do also is take a nap right before the contest. So I'm really getting some good bedtime. And I try to wake up before the contest, maybe a couple hours before, and then I will shave and shower, get myself dressed, just as if I was beginning a brand new day. So instead of my normal day starting at 6 o'clock in the morning, my normal day is now starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 5 o'clock in the afternoon before the contest. Probably the most seminal article written on sleep in contests that was done years ago in the NCJ by Randy Thompson, K5ZD. There's the link to the article he wrote on it. Or you can just go to k5zd.com and click on the articles button at the top of the screen. And it's well worth reading. I learned lots of stuff from that article years ago. And he talks briefly about food and some other things in the contest, but I think the most important thing, at least the most important thing I got out of it, was the 90-minute sleep cycle. And I didn't even know this existed, but as your body goes through sleep, it goes in a 90-minute cycle. From when you first fall asleep, 90 minutes later, you're actually approaching a more awake status. So if you can sleep in multiples of 90 minutes, an hour and a half, 3 hours, 4.5, that really makes you, when you wake up, you're much more rested than you normally would be. I think that's really important. So if you're going to go to bed, don't just sleep for an hour or 2 hours. Try to make those 90-minute cycles. I think you'll find that very much more beneficial for you. This is a busy little piece of paper. This is a band plan I make up before every contest. This was for the ARRL Dx phone last year. And you'll see my little notes here. On the left side of the paper are the hours. The contest starting at 00, going through 23 Zulu. That's day 1 on the left side. Day 2 is on the right side. And you'll see these little bands. They're just more suggestions than they are. I don't adhere to this 100%. I go back to previous year's logs and also look at logs from some of my competitors and see what bands are working for those guys at that particular times. And in the heat of the battle, at 2 o'clock in the morning, you really don't know where band you want to be on. I can refer back to the sheet that gives me some indication as to what band may be productive at that time of day. Sometimes you're not really thinking straight. But then again, this is just a guideline because conditions change. And sometimes 10 meters may open up and your band plan may say you should be on 20. Well, no, if 10 meters is open up, you need to be running Europe on 10 meters. And each of these little check marks, I check each hour off as I operate. And you see, I operated most of that. I actually took a couple hours off the first night to get an hour and a half of sleep. Took 3 hours off the second night, but the other little check marks by each hour are the hours that I operated. I guess I just forgot to mark off the last hour of the contest. And I put little notes in here, like what time is European sunrise? You certainly don't want to miss that. What time is my sunrise? And I keep little notes here about what the WWV numbers were in the contest. You see, last year was awful. The solar flux was 73. The A index was 7. The K index was 2. And then update that throughout the contest whenever I get a few moments. Little notes here like 1600 Zulu on the first day. I wrote down a little note. Can't work South America. Well, if you can't work South America in the middle of the afternoon, that tells you a pretty good idea as to how bad the conditions were in that contest. Another little note down here, it says lots of breaks. I must have taken a bunch of 10-minute breaks, getting so frustrated, I thought I'd get up and walk around just to clear my head. And my goal for the contest was 7,850 contacts by 355 mults for 1.85 million. I don't even remember what I did that year, but I keep the band plan. It gives me a little focus throughout the contest, keeps me hopefully aware of where I need to be. I don't know how many of you guys have signed up for Contest Online Scoreboard, but it's a great tool. This is a rate graph that I got from the 2020 ARRL phone contest. It was NR3X, which is the call sign used by Nate at this contest, and for YDU. And it shows you his entire rate sheet. And these are available for anybody who posts scores on Contest Online Scoreboard. You just click on their call sign, and it populates this little rate graph. You see the QSO totals per hour as it goes throughout the contest. The second row is their mults, and the final row is their cumulative score. And you can change this by bands. This is his all-band rate sheet. But for example, if you look at 1100 Zulu, you can see that he was on probably 20 meters at the time. So I know that his sunrise is an hour before mine. So if he's working guys on 20 meters at 1100 Zulu, then I'm going to be working those same guys at 1200 Zulu. And one thing about checking scores and comparing scores with stations, try to compare scores with stations in the region that have scores better than you. You don't want to compare your scores with somebody who didn't do as well as you did, because obviously that's not a very self-serving purpose. If you go back to that little band plan that I showed you, I forgot to indicate, I had some hours of the contest circled, and those are what I call power hours. And these are hours that have a greater than average amount of QSOs. And I guess it depends on your own operating style and what you're comfortable at. But if you're normally run around 40 or 50 an hour, and you think maybe you could work 60 or 70 QSOs in an hour, you'll circle those hours. Those are hours that are above and beyond what you normally do. Typically, those are at the start of the contest, 3 or 4 hours, and during the Sun's openings in the morning, on Saturdays and mornings. And usually those are when the contest scores are made, those power hours. And usually if you're going to be operating those power hours, which I hope you are, the most important thing you can do during those power hours is to be CQing. I stole this little meme from Tim in 3QE. I hope he doesn't mind, but that's Alec Baldwin from his motion picture Glengarry Glen Ross. I don't know if you guys ever seen it before, but it's an awful movie. But this little 8-minute scene that Alec Baldwin was in is wonderful. I think it's on YouTube if you want to see it. The language in it is very obscene and profane. Warning, warning, warning. So make sure you don't have any small children around when you play that 8-minute clip. But it's riveting, and you'll also be happy to know that if Alec Baldwin was in the movie, no gunplay was involved in this movie at all. And in the movie, he was giving a sales talk to a bunch of salesmen, and the line ABC was A always, B, B, C closing, always be closing. Well, in contesting, it's A always, B, B, C, CQing, always be CQing. It's easier to CQ at ARRL as it is versus CQ worldwide, for the reasons I mentioned earlier. In CQ worldwide, everybody is working everybody else. Nobody's even looking to stateside. But in ARRL, they are. Even if you have wires on 40 meters, especially CW, you can CQ on 40, and you really need to. Sideband CQing on 40 is a different story. Of course, we're limited from 7125 to 7200, and usually those are pretty packed with rather wide European signals, so there's really not much holes on a 40-meter sideband. On 40-meter CW, you got to be CQing when the band's open to Europe, especially at their sunrise, which occurs around 06 Zulu. That's when signals really peak. You can CQ on 80 if you've got some sort of antenna with gain on 80 meters, or even if you have a high dipole. In ARRL, you can CQ as opposed to CQ worldwide. It may be much more difficult to do. I've even CQ with very minimal success on 160 during ARRL on CW. I've never had any really big runs on 160, but I've had a bunch of mini runs where you can get 10 or 15, 20 guys in a row. And, you come back after you checked 80 or 40, and then you'll get another 10 or 15 guys. So CQing even on 160 can be beneficial, especially in ARRL CW. CQ machine. Of course, we all use a keyer on CW. You just push F1 and it sends all the dirty work. On sideband, it's much more difficult. It's more fatiguing to CQ on sideband if you don't have a DVK, a digital voice keyer. Most radios these days have them. I use a TS590SG to run with now. It doesn't have a DVK standard with it, but you can get one. I think it costs about $70. It's about a 10-minute install, and it gives you 4 voice messages, which is really all you need for phone. F1 is the CQ button. F2 just says 59 Alabama, 59 Georgia. F3 says thank you. And you will find if you use a DVK on the sideband, you'll CQ more often. I remember in the old days in sweepstakes, which the lengthy exchange before DVKs, I would always have to keep a little bottle of chloroseptic right next to the operating position so I could squirt my throat every now and then, because you would get so hoarse and painful. And over a 48-hour period, if you CQ a lot, which you should be on sideband, it can be very, very tiring. So if you have a modern radio that's got a DVK, I would certainly encourage you to use it. And if you don't even have a DVK, I think you can get it from MFJ. I think W9XT makes one. You got to have it. I don't think I would even do a phone contest without a CQWW machine. In 1mm sideband macros, there's seems to be some confusion over this. Some guy said, I was talking to, he says, yeah, like my radio's got a DVK in it, but I don't want to have to reach over to the radio and push the play button every time I want to CQ. Well, you don't have to do that. N1MM have these little macros. Like if you look here in the F1, it's the little macro that's within these parentheses. And they vary a little bit by manufacturer. They're all very similar. But if you check the N1MM documentation, you'll see which radio macro goes with which radio. There's ones for Yaesu, Kenwood, Elecraft's got them, ICOM's got them. So when you load these macros in, it basically emulates what you do on CW. You push F1, then you push F2, then you push F3, so forth. The most important one, obviously, is the CQ button, because that's the one you're going to be using more often. But you can actually program the entire exchange, except for the station's call sign you're working. If you're working S51DX, you can't program that in, but you can send a CQ with F1, then Sugar51DX comes back. You just say Sugar51DX, push F2, and the machine takes care of it for you. It really keeps you much more fresh throughout the contest, because sideband contesting without a DVK is just, it's a pain in the butt. It's very tiring. Europe, that's our most important part of a contest. When Europe is open, you got to be running Europe. There's a huge contester population in Europe. I don't have to tell anybody in this room that. And another great thing about Europe is there's a ton of multipliers. All these little bitty countries over there. If you can maximize your score to Europe, you need to maximize your QSO count and your multipliers in Europe. It's all about Europe and ARRL, and CQ for that matter too. But you can really, really make a huge impact on your score by maximizing Europe. When Europe is open, you need to be running those guys. And when Europe is open, you got to be CQ. Best times to catch Europe on the low bands on the Friday and Saturday nights, right at the start of the contest. 40 meters is popping with Europe. 80 meters is popping with Europe. A little bit later on, 160 will be popping with Europe. And then, of course, their sunrise is about 0600. And then they'll fade away. They'll, we look for them again on the mornings when the sun comes up here locally. Around here, it's around 1200 Zulu. You probably get it about 1100 Zulu over there in Georgia. But those are the best times to really look for Europe. If you're 160 on 80, right at their sunrise, 0600, you can really make hay into Europe. You can run guys on Europe on 80 and 160 at that time fairly easily, even with low antennas, even with wires. When Europe is open, you got to be doing the Alec Baldwin thing. You got to be always BB CCQing, always be securing when Europe is open. You're really missing the boat if you're not. We can't forget about multipliers. I know a lot of these folks in this room use SO2R, which I do. One radio for running and another radio for searching and pouncing. Keep one radio, the left radio, in my left ear, the multiplier radio in my right ear. And when I'm running guys on the left radio, I'm searching for multipliers on the right radio at the same time. And within 1mm, it's a snap. I use two keyboards. So I just turn and pivot to the right keyboard when I hear a new mult, work those guys. And 1MM also makes it easy to find mults if you're assisted, obviously. You can hit the little control up and down button and it'll take you right to the next multiplier. There's an available window too, and you can use it. It's sorted by direction. For example, if Europe's open, you can click on the available window and it'll sort all the European guys for you. So you don't have to turn a beam to go down that available list. It's 1 for 1 for 2. There's a few target-rich areas for multipliers as well. One of the most beneficial ones I have found is a couple of hours before our sunrise. So if you normally get up at dawn during the contest, try to get up a couple of hours early. 40 meters is a gold mine for multipliers, especially on CW, but then again on phone too. These are when you work those strange and rare Asian multipliers. You work the HS or the all the little wheeled VK9s and VK9 DX is one of the contests. He called me, which was a surprise. Guam, Taiwan, Korea. These multipliers you very rarely hear, but you can hear them before our dawn on 40 meters and even on 80s to some extent. And JAs are just booming in on 40 meters at that time. You can run JAs if you can. One thing to remember is you will never be louder into Asia on 40 meters than just before and after your sunrise. So if you condition your body to get up a couple of hours before you normally would, you will find all sorts of multipliers on the low bands, 40, 80, 160. It's just an Asia, Oceania gold mine for multipliers. If you really want to maximize your score, assisted is the way to go. I've operated both, obviously. If you're trying to help the club get a bigger club score, assisted is the way to go. One good thing about assisted is you can find multipliers obviously much more quicker. That leaves you much more time to CQ. So in effect, you're increasing both your QSO and your multiplier count when you're operating assisted. If you're operating unassisted, a single op, unless you're using SO2R, you've got to take time away from your runs to go look for multipliers. Time consuming. When Europe goes away, what do? After 0600, I look for JAs. Start to monitor the gray line window to see when the sun is going to go, is coming up at JA and try to get them before they do. South Americans, that's when you look for South Americans. If you're ever going to tune for rare mults, if you're in single op, one radio guy, that's a good time to do it when Europe goes away. It's also a good time to get a little sleep if you need. I try not to sleep much during the contest. Try not to eat a lot too, but it's a good time to grab a bite if you're hungry. I very rarely eat during the contest, but some people do. I know a lot of guys munch out on junk food or whatever during the contest. Probably not good for you, but it keeps the energy level up. The most important thing you can do is eat a healthy diet the week before the contest. Years ago, I went to a Huntsville Track Club meeting, which was the night before the marathon run, 26-mile run. I was there in a sponsorship role. I was not going to run a marathon, but they had this huge buffet loaded up with pasta. And one of the guys told me about carbo loading, and I had never heard of that before, where they just load up on these carbohydrates before a big physical event. There's been some dietary talk recently about whether that's valid or not. I'm not sure, but it works for me. During the week, I'll eat a lot of pasta. I don't eat during contests because what you eat during a contest, what goes in's got to come out sometime. So I don't want to take some time away from operating to do other things. I don't drink much either, but that's for the same reason as well. What goes in's got to come out. Speaking of drinking, obviously the number one rule is no alcohol. I see a bunch of guys on Facebook, and they'll have the big bottle of Jägermeister in front of the radio and talk about how they're kicking butt in the contest. Well, alcohol is a depressant. It's going to make you want to sleep, and it's going to impair your judgment. Your error rate's going to go up. So stay away from alcohol during the contest. A lot of guys also drink the Red Bulls and the Monsters, the high energy drinks. I've avoided those. I've had a tendency after I've drank a couple of those to want to sleep for some reason. It causes a bit of crash for me. Your mileage may vary. If it works for you, it works for you. It doesn't work for me. I stick with just water, some caffeinated soft drinks, and of course coffee is always good, but for the same reason, you don't want to drink too much because what goes in, got to come out. The final rule is this is supposed to be fun. Early last year, I know a lot of guys probably grew up listening to the Atlanta Braves, the Atlanta Hawks, and I'm sure you know the name Ernie Johnson and Ernie Johnson Jr. They were some announcers for the Braves. And early last year, Ernie Johnson Jr. came to speak to the University of Alabama football team during their spring practice. He's a motivational speaker. And one of the things that he spoke to, really spoke to me, he was talking to the team and he said, you know, you don't have to play football at the University of Alabama. You can go to other schools. It's not a have-to job. Playing football at the University of Alabama it's an I get to job. You get to play football at the Alabama Crimson Tide. You don't have to play football at the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I kind of view contesting as the same way. You can do a lot of things. You can play with FT8. You go to 75 meters and talk to your buddies. That's fine. But contesting to me is a lot more fun. I don't have to do it. It's not a job. It's an I get to sport. I don't have to do it. I get to do it. Everybody likes to see pictures. So I thought I'd give everybody a brief tour of K4AB here in central Alabama. I'm located 1 mile south of the Tennessee state line, right in the middle of the state, just north of Huntsville. I'm sure a lot of people know where Huntsville is. And this is a picture of the main workhorse tower at K4AB. It's 98 feet of row 25. It covers basically everything from 160 to 10 meters. The top antenna is a 2-element 40-meter Yagi and a Force 12 XR5. And they put them all on one boom and called it a Delta 6BA, which is basically 2 elements on 40 through 10 meters. JK Antennas manufactures this antenna now. I think they bought all the Force 12 catalog. Below it at 33 feet is another Force 12 XR5, which is an exact duplicate of the antenna above it, except it doesn't have 40 meters. Hanging off that tower is a K8UR style 80-meter wire foursquare, which is just four bent dipoles attached to the top and the bottom and pulled out in the middle. And it's also shunt fed for 160 meters. I've got 73 radials at the base of that tower. Not because 73 is a special number, because that's when I ran out of wire. They range in length from 130 feet to almost 300 feet. And I figured it up one day, I've probably got about 2.5 miles of copper wire as radials under that thing for 160 meters. The second tower is a 60-foot tower. It's got a high gain T87 at the top. And I use it just as a multiplier antenna, basically. If I'm running Europe on the other tower, I'll use this one to pick up multipliers along the way. There's also a TA33 at 30 feet. And that's a stateside antenna, basically. It's aimed at Cleveland, Ohio, so I can get everything in sweepstakes from basically Minnesota to W2. And it's also got a couple of 40-meter phased bent dipoles on it as well. My short tower is the PYLU Death Ray. It's fixed to South America and the Caribbean. It's only about 30 feet, but in the afternoons on 10 and 15, it's one call to PY and LU. And I don't have to turn a beam. I just flip a switch and boom, bam, those guys are in the log. Does really, really well, surprisingly. I was surprised that little 30-foot antenna would do so well. 80-meter receive foursquare. I use it on 160 as well. It's a DX Engineering receive foursquare. And I don't even know if I would want to participate in the contest anymore after using receive antennas. It opens up a whole other level of stations on 80 and 160 that you just can't hear with your transmit antenna. Much less fatiguing because you don't get all the static and the QR Nancy that we get so often here in the South. And even if you don't have the room for a foursquare, you can put up some guys here locally have experimented with bogs, averages on the ground. I think you can fit those in at 150, 160 feet. They claim that it works really, really well. And if you don't have the room, boy, that's something I would certainly consider. The rigs at K4AB, TS590SG is the run radio. That's the one on the left. And for the multiplier radio, I've got an FTDX 5000. couple of amps, one for the run radio, one for the pulse radio, each of them Ameritron AL1200s. That's the operating position, the K4AB, the run radio is on the left, the mult was on the right, N1MM with the N1MM spectrum display on each radio, using AirSpy Discover Plus for the left radio and a SDR Play RSP1 on the right radio. And one good thing about these N1MM spectrum displays is there's a little button that you can click and it will show you holes in the spectrum that you can call CQ in. You don't have to tune around for a place to call CQ. It will recommend 5 little spots that are good places for you to call CQ. So you can find a CQ hole a lot quicker than just running around and trying to find a really, really cool tool. The secret to big scores in ARRL, well, there is no secret. Someone once told me there's no secret in contesting, or there's no secret in getting a score in ARRL. The number one thing is stay in the chair. The more you operate, the higher your score. Number 2, call CQ and call CQ often. Those guys are looking for you. Stop looking for them. They'll find you. And the last rule is have fun. Again, this is supposed to be fun. It's not a I have to do job. It's an I get to do job. And hopefully that will prompt some comments, questions, suggestions. Anybody got any questions or comments?
Larry, I thought that was great. One comment I'd add is one of the big additions I had in the last few years is I got one of those purple seat cushions. The better the chair, the longer you can spend in the seat.
You mean one like this?
Yeah. Here's mine.
Great minds or great butts think alike.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Chairs can they can be comfortable. They can be too comfortable, which may cause you to over relax and not push as hard. And then again, they can be so uncomfortable. All you want to do is get up out of the chair. So you got to find some happy medium.
You mentioned 2 keyboards, and you had the right one associated with the mult radio. Mm-hmm. Is that some function in N1MM, or how did you do that?
It is. N2IC put that in. I don't think it's supported by N1MM, but it's in the documentation. You can go to the N1MM website. Just type in 2 keyboards, and it'll put you right to it. A lot of guys just use one and switch back and forth. And I've done that in the past, but I find 2 keyboards much more conducive to me. I can just turn to the left when I'm on the run radio and turn to the right when I'm on the mult radio, and it's just a lot easier, and it bypasses all the control left arrow, control right arrow switching. It's just easier that way. But
you just have one logging screen, is that correct?
I have, yes, one logging screen, but there's an entry window for the left radio and an entry window for the right radio. So when you and the left keyboard goes to the left radio entry key window, and the right keyboard goes to the right entry window.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. N1MM does not support that. They put it in there, and questions come up on the reflector now and then. They don't support it. It's experimental as far as they're concerned. Right. But I also use the 2 keyboards and love that. One thing, a question for you. I have found with the 2 keyboards, I use a programmable keyboard and use the jump to the molten Q or jump to the spectrum display. And with 2 keyboards, that doesn't necessarily work. It sometimes tends to make the run radio jump and not the other. Have you had any problems with that?
I've had that too, yeah. No, I've had that too. It happens maybe 3 or 4 times in a contest for me.
I haven't found a way around it. Any ideas?
No, I will say this. Once I put in the second spectrum display and has it associated with radio B, and the left spectrum display associated with radio A, I haven't noticed that because I'm clicking on the window for radio B and it's going straight to radio B. Now, if you have in previous contests, I only had one spectrum display. And sometimes it would flip flop between the radios. But with 2 spectrum displays, I haven't noticed that for some reason, which probably means it'll happen during ARRL or LCW.